Elena's heels clicked against the marble floors of Villa Rosewood, each step echoing through the grand hallway like a countdown to disaster. The summer air hung heavy with the scent of gardenias and secrets, both carefully cultivated by the Rossi family for generations. Tonight was supposed to be perfect, her sister Sophia's engagement party, the crown jewel of the summer social season. Yet something felt off, like a wrong note in an otherwise flawless symphony. The great room buzzed with Silicon Valley's elite, their laughs and conversation bouncing off the vaulted ceilings. Elena paused at the entrance, adjusting the silk of her emerald dress, always the perfect sister, the perfect daughter, even when no one was watching. Her eyes found Marcus immediately. How could they not? He commanded attention even from his wheelchair, his charisma filling the room as naturally as air. Elena, darling, her mother's voice carried across the room, pitch perfect as always. Come meet Marcus properly. You've been so busy with the hospital, you've barely had time to know your future brother-in-law. Elena threaded her way through the crowd, accepting kisses on cheeks and greeting family friends. As she approached, she noticed something that made her physical therapist's instincts tingle. Marcus's fingers weren't just resting on his wheelchair's arm, they were moving in a distinct pattern. Tap tap tap, pause, tap tap tap. The same rhythm she taught her patients for leg muscle stimulation exercises. Elena, Sophia beamed, one manicured hand possessively on Marcus's shoulder. Isn't he everything I said? Harvard Business School, founded his own tech company, and still so humble. Her sister's smile was radiant, but her eyes held something else, something that reminded Elena of their childhood, when Sophia would arrange her dolls just so and refuse to let anyone else touch them. The famous sister, Marcus extended his hand, his grip firm and warm. Sophia tells me you're D. 3 weeks after the engagement party, Elena couldn't shake the image of Marcus's rhythmic finger movements. As she swiped her key card at FitLife Gym at 11:30 p.m., she told herself she was being ridiculous. The late-night workout was her normal routine after long hospital shifts, not an excuse to investigate her suspicions. The gym was nearly empty, just how she liked it. The usual late-night regulars nodded in greeting, the insomniac lawyer on the treadmill, the tech programmer who turned the weight room into his second office. Elena changed quickly, but instead of heading to her usual yoga mat, she found herself drawn to the rehabilitation center at the back of the building. She'd recommended this gym to countless patients because of its state-of-the-art rehab facilities. Now, as she approached the frosted glass doors, she heard the unmistakable sound of encouragement from within. That's it, just 5 more steps. You're doing great. Elena's hand froze on the door handle. She knew that voice, Dr. James Chen, one of the city's best rehabilitation specialists. She'd attended his lectures at Stanford. The door was slightly ajar, and through the gap, she saw something that made her breath catch. Marcus stood between parallel bars, his knuckles white from gripping the metal. Sweat darkened his shirt, and his face was tight with concentration. As she watched, he took a shaking step forward, then another. His legs trembled with effort, but they were moving. Actually moving. For more, Dr. Chen encouraged. Remember your breathing. A gasp escaped Elena's lips before she could stop it. Marcus's head snapped up, his eyes meeting hers through the gap in the door. For a moment, nobody moved. Then Marcus's grip on the bars loosened, and he sank into his wheelchair, which waited nearby. Elena, he said, his voice a mixture of resignation and, was that relief? I suppose we should talk. Dr. Chen looked between them, understanding dawning on his face. We can end. The following afternoon, Elena stood frozen in the hallway of her family's villa, her hand hovering over the handle to Sophia's old bedroom. Her sister's voice drifted through the door, sharp and clear despite her attempt to whisper. I'm telling you, Sarah, it's perfect this way, Sophia said, the smile evident in her tone. You should see how everyone looks at me now. The dedicated fiancé, the selfless caregiver. And Marcus? He's not going anywhere. Who else would want him like this? Elena's stomach churned. She'd come to return a borrowed dress, not to eavesdrop on her sister's true nature being laid bare. Of course I love him, Sophia continued, her voice taking on a defensive edge. But love means different things to different people. My kind of love is protective. Remember David? How he left me for that yoga instructor. That won't happen with Marcus. He needs me. The sound of approaching footsteps forced Elena to move. She slipped into the adjacent study, her heart pounding as their mother passed by, humming contentedly. Through the crack in the door, Elena watched Sophia emerge from her room, phone still pressed to her ear. I have to go, Sophia whispered. But don't worry about Elena. I know exactly how to handle my dear, caring sister. Over the next week, Elena witnessed her sister's manipulation unfold like a masterclass in control. It started small, Sophia accidentally spilling water on Marcus's therapy appointment cards, then offering to reschedule them herself. The new appointments mysteriously conflicted with important family events or business meetings that couldn't be missed. During Sunday dinner, when Marcus mentioned wanting to try aquatherapy, Sophia burst into tears, revealing that their cousin Lucia was getting divorced. We simply must spend more time helping her through this, she declared, gripping Marcus's hand. You understand, don't you, darling? Family comes first. Elena later discovered that Lucia's marriage was fi. The Rossi family's Thursday dinner tradition had remained unchanged for 3 generations. Like clockwork, everyone gathered at 7 in the grand dining room, where the crystal chandelier cast warm light over the antique mahogany table. Tonight, however, the air crackled with unspoken tension. Elena noticed the signs immediately. Marcus's wheelchair was too far from the table, Sophia's latest passive-aggressive move after finding them in the garden. Their mother's hands shook slightly as she arranged the silverware, while their father buried himself in his phone, avoiding eye contact. Only Nana Rosa, perched regally at the head of the table, seemed unaffected by the undercurrent of discord. The osso buco smells wonderful, Mama, Sophia chirped, playing her role perfectly. She ladled an extra portion onto Marcus's plate, her voice dripping with sweetness. You need to keep up your strength, darling. The physical therapy has been so taxing lately. Marcus's knuckles whitened around his fork. Elena saw something shift in his expression, a breaking point reached. Actually, he said, his voice steady despite its quietness, the therapy has been going quite well. The clatter of Sophia's fork against fine china shattered the room's careful atmosphere. Darling, we talked about managing expectations? No, Sophia. Marcus pushed his wheelchair back from the table. You talked. You always talk. You manage and arrange and control, but you never listen. Elena held her breath. Their father finally looked up from his phone, while their mother pressed a hand to her throat, pearls clicking anxiously against her rings. I can walk. 2 words, spoken quietly, yet they exploded through the room like a bomb. Sophia's face drained of color. Marcus, you're confused, Sophia started, reaching for his hand. The doctors said? The doctors said I'm making excellent progress. Marcus gripped the arms of his wheelchair. Dr. Chen believes I could be fully mobile within. The week following Nana Rosa's proclamation passed in a blur of whispered conversations and slammed doors. Sophia had locked herself in her apartment, refusing all visitors except their mother, who returned from each visit looking more exhausted than before. The family business teetered on the edge of chaos as rumors of the broken engagement spread through Silicon Valley's elite circles. Elena stood in Nana Rosa's private garden, watching the sunset paint the roses in shades of gold and crimson. The same colors that had decorated Sophia's now-cancelled wedding inspiration boards. I thought I'd find you here, Marcus's voice came from behind her. He walked slowly, using a cane for support, his therapy-strengthened legs carrying him steadily across the stone path. Your grandmother said you always came here to think when you were young. To hide, mostly, Elena corrected, not turning around. From Sophia, usually. Ironic, isn't it? Elena. He moved to stand beside her, close enough that she could smell his cologne, something woodsy and expensive that Sophia had probably chosen. We need to talk about this. About how my grandmother is forcing us to marry to save the family's reputation. Elena finally faced him, her voice sharp with bitter humor. Or about how my sister is threatening to destroy your company if we don't play along? About how we're both trapped in a situation neither of us wanted, Marcus replied quietly. And about what we're going to do about it. Elena laughed, but there was no joy in it. Do? What can we do? Sophia has made it clear, if you don't maintain the engagement to a Rossi daughter, she'll release her evidence about your company. The board is already nervous about your condition. A scandal would destroy everything you've built. And if we don't marry, Marcus added, your family's merger falls apart. Your father's firm loses millions. The Rossi name becomes synonymous with scandal instead of success. He ran a hand. 2 weeks into their forced engagement, Elena began noticing the whispers. They followed her through family gatherings like persistent shadows, growing louder with each passing day. At Cousin Maria's baby shower, she overheard her Aunt Lucia's harsh whisper, always the perfect daughter, wasn't she? Now we know why, she was plotting to steal her sister's fiancé all along. The campaign against her was as subtle as it was effective. Sophia might have retreated from public view, but her influence spread through the family like poison through water. You shouldn't let it bother you, Marcus said one evening as they left his therapy session. He'd graduated from the parallel bars to walking with a single cane, his progress remarkable now that he no longer had to hide it. They'll tire of gossip eventually. Elena was about to respond when she noticed something off about his car. Wait, she grabbed his arm, stopping him from opening the driver's door. Crouching down, she examined the front tire. A thin trail of fluid leaked from the brake line, a clean cut, not natural wear. Someone tampered with your brakes, she said, her voice shaking. If you'd driven home. Marcus's face hardened. Sophia. You can't prove it was her. Who else would benefit from an accident that puts me back in a wheelchair? He ran a hand through his hair in frustration. She's getting desperate. The next day, Elena's hospital supervisor called her into his office. There's been a complaint, he said, not meeting her eyes. About your relationship with a patient's family member. Given your sister's public statements about the situation, we think it's best if you take a leave of absence. Elena felt the floor drop out from under her. Public statements? She found them that evening, dozens of comments on medical forums, all from anonymous accounts, insinuating she'd violated ethical boundaries to pursue her sister's fiancé. Sophia's blogger friends had picked up the story, SPI. The morning of the wedding dawned clear and bright, sunlight streaming through the stained glass windows of St. Catherine's Cathedral. Elena stood before the full-length mirror in the bridal suite, her white gown catching the colored light like scattered diamonds. 3 months had passed since the gala confrontation, and Sophia had seemingly retreated, accepting defeat after Nana Rosa's threat. Too quiet, Elena murmured to herself, adjusting her veil. She's been too quiet. Her mother fussed with the train, tears already threatening to ruin her perfect makeup. Everything is perfect, Kara. Even your sister sent her best wishes from the spa retreat. Elena caught her grandmother's eye in the mirror. They both knew Sophia hadn't gone to any spa retreat. The private investigator they'd hired had tracked her movements around the city, watching her meet with various people connected to Marcus's company. But they'd found no concrete evidence of further plotting. It's time, her father announced from the doorway, his voice thick with emotion. But before Elena could take his arm, a commotion erupted from the direction of the church proper. Gasps and exclamations filtered through the heavy wooden doors. Elena's heart jumped, this was it. Whatever Sophia had planned, it was happening now. She gathered her skirts and rushed to the door, her father calling after her. Through the crack, she saw what had caused the stir. Marcus stood at the altar. Not in his wheelchair, not with his cane, but standing tall and straight in his tailored tuxedo. They had planned this moment carefully, wanting it to be a symbol of truth finally breaking free from lies. But before the murmurs of surprise could settle, another sound cut through the air, the sharp crack of heels against marble and a familiar voice raised in hysteria. No, no, and oh. Sophia burst through the side door of the church, her designer dress torn and muddy at the hem, her perfectly maintained facade shattered comp. 6 months after the wedding that never was, Elena stood in the garden of Villa Rosewood, watching sunset paint the sky in shades of pink and gold. The same garden where she'd first noticed Marcus's secret, where they'd planned their defense against Sophia, where they'd finally admitted their growing feelings for each other. Now it would witness one more milestone. Are you ready? Nana Rosa appeared beside her, leaning on her ever-present cane. The past months had added more silver to her hair, but her eyes remained sharp as ever. I still can't believe we're doing this, Elena smiled, adjusting her simple ivory dress, so different from the elaborate gown she'd worn that day at the cathedral. Sometimes, her grandmother said, patting her hand, the best things come from the worst moments. The worst moment had been Sophia's final act of desperation. Her lunge toward Marcus had been stopped by Thomas, but the damage she'd intended was psychological rather than physical. She'd pulled out a stack of papers, medical records she'd falsified, emails she'd fabricated, years of manipulation documented in cruel detail. See, she'd screamed as security led her away. See how much I did for you? You needed me. You all needed me. The weeks that followed were a blur of family therapy sessions, legal meetings, and painful revelations. Sophia was diagnosed with narcissistic personality disorder and admitted to a specialized treatment facility. Their mother had broken down, blaming herself for enabling Sophia's controlling behavior. Their father had thrown himself into restructuring the family business, ensuring it would never again be vulnerable to emotional manipulation. Elena? Marcus's voice pulled her from her memories. He stood in the garden doorway, handsome in his dark suit, no trace of his former disability visible in his confident stance. Everyone's ready. The garden had been transformed. Twinkling lights hung from the trees, turning the space into an